Welcome to Confidently Wrong. This is our 8th episode. Long time coming. We had a few hiccups happening. We're really excited for today's show. One quick note, you guys might have noticed if you're listening that we've put up a new logo. It's a black, pink, blue Miami Vice vibe feeling to it. We're really excited, or I'm really excited about it. I think it looks dope. So that should have hit our Twitter, Instagram, and what else? Our show page should have hit the all the podcasts. So you can check that out. Tell us what you think. We're just really excited about it. Looks a little bit more professional than the one I made earlier.
Where did our new logo even come from? Wesley pirated it.
Internet. No, I edited it in Canva. So thanks, Canva, for giving us the some of the tools for editing that. Our socials, you can find us on Twitter at confidently_pod. Instagram, same thing, at confidently_pod. There's not a whole lot going on the Instagram one yet because Mike is in charge of that. But Twitter's got some stupid takes going on.
God.
No, but the Instagram, we'll get there on the Instagram, friends. It's a podcast audio thing, and Instagram's a very visual.
Wesley's brother-in-law. I'm sorry if you've been really lacking Instagram content from your favorite podcast.
I don't think he's a very big
to nothing for him.
Yeah. I don't think he's a big Instagram user, so it'll be all right.
Sure.
All right. So that takes care of our show. We're gonna talk a little bit today about The Mandalorian. It finally released season 2. The first couple of episodes are now up on Disney Plus. We'll then start talking about our favorite next-gen console hardware, PS5 and Xbox Series X. And then that'll pretty much be it. So we're really excited for today. First, to start off, though, we do want to acknowledge kind of why we were so long on this one coming. We were definitely scheduled to record last week, and then nature had other plans. Hurricane Zeta came through New Orleans and the Gulf Coast, knocking out a ton of most people's power, knocked out internet, including for some of our hosts. So we had to push it back. I don't know, guys. Does everything seem like it's okay down there?
Yeah, we're getting there. I think everyone's got power and internet back. Savon took the longest out of anyone I know.
Oh my goodness, that was miserable. A telephone pole like 2 houses over from my house like completely snapped and it was just dangling. And we had power, and then once they fixed it, they had to cut power. And then we just had no internet for the whole time. So it was a little rough. I don't know how they did it back in the day, but we're here now, and that's all that matters.
What did you do without internet for a week?
Yeah, what is life like back in the 1980s? What did you do?
Yeah, man, I was trying to read, but all of my books are like very upsetting topic-wise. Like, I had like that Bob Woodward fear book. I was like, I'm not about to sit and read this for fun.
Sit in the dark reading fucking Bob Woodward.
Right?
That's a little heavy.
Nah, but I have mad battery packs, so I was just listening to old basketball podcasts. And when I did have power and no internet, I played a lot of Metal Gear Solid.
Do you want to give a shout out to any basketball podcasts out there?
Shout out to Zach Lowe. Shout out to The Ringer. Shout out to Zach Lowe and The Ringer. They hold it down. Chris Verno.
Bro, I love Zach Lowe's podcast. If you're a basketball fan out there and you haven't listened to Zach Lowe's podcast, it is so good.
Even when I don't agree with him, his takes are just very reasonable. I'm like, okay, this isn't foolish. So yeah, they held it down for me.
Yeah. Zach Lowe is not a hot take guy. Zach Lowe is definitely like, let me do the research. Let me talk to the people. Find out what's really going on from the experts.
Couldn't possibly be me. Having an informed education.
It's the opposite of our show.
You would love Chris Verno, Mike.
All right. Well, I'm glad to hear that everything seems to be coming together for you guys personally down there in New Orleans. Hopefully everyone else has also been safe and kind of getting it back together. I know schools are getting back in gear, so that's a good sign. And then we're recording here on, what's today? Saturday, November 7th. Mid-morning, late morning, and some of the news organizations, AP, ABC, NBC, CNN, have just recently, in the past half hour or so, called the election for Biden. They've decided that Pennsylvania is going to go his way. Our show is not necessarily about politics. We're not experts in politics, but we are certainly relieved, excited, about Donald Trump being out of the White House. Jesus Christ, it's been a long 4 years. 5 years if you count his campaign that was awful and ridiculous. So,
By the way, Fox News called it too.
oh,
for
Fox News.
real?
Okay.
Oh, wow.
So we're in
they
it.
are eating it.
The second betrayal of the week.
Oh man, this is secondhand happiness.
Yeah, so I mean, we're
Is
all.
this
I
what
think
this
we're
feels
all
like?
just over the moon that he's just fucking gone. I don't think this fixes everything, right? But certainly a nice fucking, temporary victory at least. Jesus. All right. So it's time for our annual, weekly, daily segment. I don't know, showly segment. Is that a word? What we're loving, guys. Anybody hop in? What's something that you're loving this week, right now?
So I just got this TV you had that we talked about, the CX, the OLED. I got it yesterday. I was worried because it was too heavy for me to pick up by myself, but thank God my girlfriend is yoked. So just soy boy me needed to rely on. the
Yo,
strong
can you
woman
imagine
again.
if you tried to pick it up yourself and snap the screen? Like how horrified?
That
would
was
you
my
have been?
issue, and they say put it face down on the table, but it's like fucking like half an inch thick, so you literally feel like you're gonna snap it in half. And it's like me and Anna have the type of relationship where like building IKEA furniture, moving shit, like we fight like incessantly. So this, I was like, she's helping me, like don't be obnoxious, but I was so stressed she was just gonna fucking snap in half. But it looks cool. It looks really cool. You have to calibrate them, I think, is the thing with these TVs. You have to like make an effort to like calibrate the settings. And the thing I'm running into is like, there's not a lot of like shit that you can stream that is high quality enough that it warrants having that TV. Right. So it's like hard to get, like, there are no 4K sports streams as far as I know. So you can't watch games like that. But like I turned on I played like even just Warzone looked way better. I played like Ghost of Tsushima. I turned that back on because that game has great graphics, but I forgot how to play the game. So I was just getting wrecked for like 10 minutes. I was like, this isn't fun. I'm not going to keep doing this. But it's a really cool TV. I'm excited for the PS5. And the last thing is like in anticipation, I bought the TV. I was going to buy the PS5. I forgot that I pre-ordered Miles Morales on the PS5 before securing a console, so now I have that game coming to just taunt me for a couple weeks before I'm able to lose sleep over getting this console, unlike, cool as a cucumber Savant over here.
Just duct tape the package onto your TV screen.
Yeah,
While you wait for the PS5 to
motivating.
come
I'm just sitting like doing push-ups for no reason, like a sociopath with like Miles Morales just on an altar in front of me.
To be clear, for those of you listening at home and you can't see what we're looking at here, Savan is sitting in his purple tinted bedroom with white velvet drapes, but what he's wearing is, I don't know how to describe it. It's a maroon velour
Jesus
monogrammed bathrobe with
got-
leather
yeah.
lapels.
They're
I mean,
quilted and striped. Striped piping.
Trimmed. Yeah, I mean, it is.
And it's a full
It is
body.
a sight. It is a sight to behold. Maybe that should be what you're loving right now, Savan.
You look like
what
a
is this?
70s porn star.
Is
mean,
that such a bad thing?
He's
Hey,
filming something for your
depends who
TV,
you
man.
ask.
Hey,
Yeah, Savant's
Hey.
gonna be that 4K high fidelity content.
Coming at you.
no, what I'm loving is, I mean, I bought this rope months ago, but like, it was a birthday gift, but I'm always loving it. And now that it's something, this is going to be my podcast uniform, so get used to it. So I'm loving that. Also, I am loving, when the power was out, I had minimal things, not the power was out, but when I had no internet, I was like, all right, I got to play some of my offline games. So I started dusting off stuff that I haven't played in a minute. Metal Gear Solid 5, still consistently, probably the best stealth game I've ever played. Mechanics wise, execution wise, no right way to play, making you think outside the box. I'm really sitting in my house like, man, how am I about to break into this base and kill these people?
Man, I started that game in like 30 minutes into a cutscene that I had no end in sight. I just turned it off, and I've never made it through. Like,
I'm sorry you can't handle the genius of Hideo Kojima.
it's such a long. The cutscenes are like literal TV shows that just make no sense.
Don't play Metal Gear Solid 4 because that game is.
I did play that
movie
game,
with
and
some
I was like
playable
13,
sections.
so I was just like, "Oh, what is going on? This is so cool." But now I'm just like, I don't have the attention for that.
I went to dinner for Metal Gear Solid 4 and came back and a cutscene was still happening. Like, talked to my family and ate dinner. They're like, Savon, come eat. So teenager can't argue. I was eating for at least 45 minutes. and a cutscene was still happening.
So cutscenes are no longer measured in minutes. It's like 1.5 meals. That cut length of the cutscene.
You know what technology they need to create? They need to create the watch speed adjustment on like the PS5, so you can watch a cutscene, still get the gist of it, but at twice the speed, just like YouTube. That's what they need.
It's a good idea.
I don't want to skip it entirely because I want
Would
the
there
story
be pitch
still.
control?
No. They gotta sound like chipmunks. They gotta sound like chipmunks.
Brian, what are you loving this week?
For all you Switch owners out there, I've been playing the new demo for Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, which is a prequel for Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, which is arguably one of the greatest games ever, period.
Agree.
And I'm definitely on that boat. I wasn't really into this prequel idea because Hyrule Warriors doesn't play like a traditional Zelda game. It's a brawler. It's it's one versus hordes of like hundreds, and there are hundreds of bad guys on the screen. And in this game, you don't just get to play Zelda. I mean, you don't get to just play Link. You also get to play as Zelda, as 4 different warriors who are from the first game in cutscenes, and you get to play another NPC who's from Breath of the Wild named Impa, who's like the baddest character. She plays like Naruto. Like, she has clones of herself. She does all sorts of like weird magic shinobi stuff, and like I was just like blown away by this game. I wasn't expecting it to be good, but it's definitely awesome, and I'm gonna pick it up as soon as it drops at the end of the month.
Nice. Well, we'll have to give you time to give us the review on that when you're done with it.
We don't need
or when you
to
play the big
discuss this in depth, but speaking of Switch, just one game, Brian, you should play. Anyone that has a Switch should play is Hades. It's like a roguelite game, which I never played before. It's so fucking good, and it's like it's so hard for a game to keep my attention nowadays, especially something that's like grindy and like the difficulty is a big part of it. But that game is just so good, and everybody should play it.
What's it called? Rogue what?
It's called
Hades.
It's like roguelite, but the game is called Hades. It's like a specific type of game where it's essentially about like there's a series of dungeons you have to escape, and they're each randomly generated with like each room is different and the enemies in it. But once you die, you go all the way back to the beginning. So the whole point is like escaping. It's really cool.
Cue the Dungeons and Dragons jokes. All right. Thanks, Mike. That sounds cool. I don't have a Switch, so I can't pick that up, but it does sound cool. So the last pod we did was actually during the NBA Finals. I think it was maybe after Game 5 that we had talked, and the Lakers were up 3-1 or 3-2 or something like that. They pulled it out in Game 6. That seems like a lifetime ago. I celebrated forever. I told my kids that I teach that they better watch out because I was being reckless that week, and I just like clowned on them the entire week, and I didn't care. The iPhone 12 dropped for the iPhone 12 and iPhone 12 Pro at the 6.1 inch size. I picked up the iPhone 12 regular, upgraded from the iPhone 7. The biggest difference is not the screen, although the screen is much better and very cool. It's been the battery life, man. I've been making it through the day.
Wild.
It's crazy. I mean, the 7 under normal use, I think, at 5 p.m. I'd be down to like 20% or something. And I'm not a heavy phone user during the day. On the iPhone 12 at 5 p.m., I think I'm still usually above 50, still at like 55 or 60%. So it's been pretty crazy to have that much extra headroom on there. The Dodgers ended up winning the World Series. I'm not a big baseball fan, but growing up in LA, I used to watch them a lot. So I watched the playoffs, and watching them come through was pretty cool. Do we have time to talk about like shopping in the times of COVID? I went to buy some stuff at the bike shop, and I had never been there before, and their setup was just crazy. So normally, right, you go into the shop, you kind of browse, and you're like, okay, well, let me look at this helmet, or let me look at that shirt and this shirt, and like try them on or whatever. Like this shop is not fucking messing around at all. They have you park outside in the parking lot. Nobody is allowed inside the shop except the people who work there. Nice. So they come to your car. They basically are your personal shopper. You text them and say like, hey, this is what I'm interested and they're basically your personal shopper. You tell them like, I want these things, and they go inside and they bring you out your options, and then you pick the one you want, and that's it. And then they go inside, they take your credit card, and they buy it for you or whatever. It was just like a crazy, like, inefficient process, and it was fine. Like the lady was like super knowledgeable, but the number of times she had to like go back inside the store to like get something different was like nuts. She doesn't have anywhere to put it, right? There's no like bench for her to put the things down, so she's like carrying like 3 shirts and like, okay, well, what about this one, and like doing dinosaur arms trying to hang on to one shirt while showing me the other one. It was pretty interesting, that experience, and how inefficient it was. I think it took me an hour or something like that at the store.
How inefficient it was.
I want
Something
that
that
shopping.
could have taken like
Sounds awful.
I want that shopping set up for Baskin Robbins. So, like,
God.
I'm trying all 31 flavors. You got to come back out each time.
Yeah,
That person would
I'll
hate
try
you
the,
and
the
spit in
chocolate
the-
chip mint again, please, if you don't mind.
I'm not 100% sold on it. Yeah.
I'm going to go with vanilla.
Actually, how many? I'm gonna try
That's a
all
Curb Your
36 flavors.
Enthusiasm bit.
Yeah, so that was an interesting thing that I've never seen before, that it was just that kind of experience. Anyways, I think we should move on to our big topic of the day. I know that some of us are excited, so we're going to let some of those folks, Mike, shine a little bit here.
Yeah,
So
boy.
Mandalorian Season 2, Episode 1 came out last week. Episode 2 just came out yesterday, but we haven't all seen it, so we're not going to talk about it yet.
It's just me.
Mike, how good was that episode, my friend?
It was very good. I think going into the season, people were like thinking like, oh, maybe they're gonna like break away from like the episodic adventure of the week kind of deal, and we'll now start diving into like the deep like overarching story, especially like the way last season ended, and like knowing that Ahsoka and a lot of the Rebels characters are going to be on it. We didn't get
Nope, they did not. They did not.
We didn't get any of that, really. The one thing we did get was Boba Fett, and I think that that's fair. But overall, it was like a cool episode. It was an awesome story. It did a really lot of cool fan service, like Cobb Vanth, his speeder bike being the engine of a pod racer that looks very similar to what young Anakin's pod racer was. Like the scream, the sound of the crate dragon was the same one Obi-Wan made in A New Hope to scare away the Sand People. And I think just having like the Sand People as like a major character really, like, for me, not to bring in the sequels, but it's just like it seems so easy. And maybe it's just Dave Filoni, but he makes it seem so easy to connect all this stuff to the larger lore of Star Wars. Like, even if it's just like kind of like Easter eggs like that, or like starting off with Boba Fett's armor, and then not only does the color make it pretty clear that it's Boba's armor, but even the dent in the helmet that was in the original trilogy, that dent. It was like Dave Filoni wrote a Clone Wars episode showing how Boba got that dent. So it's so cool that even if you like don't love Star Wars, you're just getting these awesome like episodic adventures. If you do love Star Wars, like it's gradually adding on to the lore in like the best way that's been done in live action. So while the episode for me, it wasn't like, mind-blowing, like Ahsoka battling Moff Gideon with like the Darksaber, like it's clear we're on that track, and it's again, it just makes it clear that Dave Filoni's the right person and Jon Favreau are the right people to be like making this part of Star Wars right now. And
How do we
Savan,
feel about the
Ryan, yeah.
Monster of the Week thing, or Adventure of the Week?
I mean, I don't love it as
strategy.
someone that I love the lore of Star Wars, and Savan, I think you know even more about the lore in some ways than I do. I want like to just see Ahsoka and like dive into all that shit, but I'm also like a known hype beast that has zero self-control. So it's like if I was making the decisions for the show, it'd be fucking terrible. So that's why like I can kind of sit back and just be like, I trust Dave Filoni, who's done so much good shit in Star Wars, to really deliver the shit. But Savan, I don't know how you feel about kind of the Monster of the Week episodic, like Saturday morning TV kind of vibe.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm digging everything. First of all, I'm agreeing with everything you said before, like the execution. You could be a Star Wars vet and have seen an episode and all the callbacks just have you like shaking in your chair, you could have never seen anything Star Wars related a day in your life and still have appreciated all of the like things that went into that episode. Like a hit dent in the helmet for us means, oh, look at this story about Boba Fett. Someone else that says, hey, this is some really worn armor that's been through a lot. Either way, it conveys the same point, but everyone can appreciate it. So I feel like the callbacks weren't alienating, you know, which sometimes they can be. As far as the Monster of the Week thing, I'm a huge fan. A lot of my favorite shows, them having lots of adventures unrelated to the main story allows you to just have meaningful character development and meaningful world building, because you can have things happen that aren't going to tie to the main plot. Like Ahsoka and the stuff with the Empire, there's no reason that's going to be relevant to a Krayt Dragon out in the desert terrorizing a town. But if you commit to doing its own little adventure every week, it gives you an excuse to show off the world, show off the culture, show off the people. And I don't think sticking to the main plot is a way that's going to always effectively do that. And it makes like the inevitable showdowns that happen that much better, because we get to see people get better at stuff, different adventures they've been through that had nothing to do with what's happening now. So I'm a very big fan of it.
It's almost
Also,
like the
Boba
parallel.
fake out, loved it. Like I was like, oh, that's the Boba. He took the arm off. I was like, oh, now I don't look like your boy.
Surprise! It's
Great.
Timothy Oliphant.
But then when you see Tamora Morrison at the end of the episode and then his name in the credits, like that just absolutely shook me, because that's probably like bringing him back from the dead is easily the most like ambitious thing that's been done in live action Star Wars canon since episode 3 came out.
How did he survive going into the mouth?
I think there is actually a story in canon about like what happened. I don't know it off the top of my head.
It's not canon anymore because of the whole like how they've rewritten the canon with the Disney acquisition. But originally how it was that he was in the pit, and just I think they did like a whole like his armor, but also sheer just force of being a badass. He was able to like damage it enough to get out, and then he has like stories that happen later. But none of that is canon now, so they really can kind of do whatever they want. There was no point where he was implied to have been like living as like maybe an exiled Tusken Raider. Like that was nothing that ever happened.
Yeah.
So they're going a totally new direction with Boba Fett post Sarlacc, which I'm excited for.
But it's cool. Like we have no idea what it like. Is he gonna be like antagonistic? Is he gonna be a villain? Is he gonna be helpful? Like is he gonna have like post traumatic stress, which is something like Dave Filoni's already done with characters. Like he brought like Darth Maul when he brought Darth Maul back from the dead. Like it wasn't just like, oh, here's a new character like back on his bullshit. It was like this is like the character now going through their own shit. So I think that using Boba as like the first jump into really bridging into existing Star Wars stuff like makes sense. And I think writing for like obviously writing for the clones is a bit different than writing for Boba Fett, but I think Boba is just tangential to everything. Like Dave Filoni has been writing in Star Wars for a long time, so it makes sense. And the last thing I'll say, because I can't really talk about Star Wars I love without talking about Star Wars I hate, is going to be that when you're talking about, like, you know, they're taking their time, they're doing the world building, like the larger story isn't progressing, that's the literal opposite of what the sequels did, where it's like, we don't care about world building, we're not going to bring in, like, really, like, the existing lore in a meaningful way. We have these plot points and we're just going to go, like, ram them through dry, you know? So, like...
Oh, totally.
So it's crazy seeing
Brad,
that.
you like ramming things through dry?
Absolutely. That's the way to go.
Oh my god.
That's what Brian was doing.
Ain't fun without
to
friction.
celebrate the election.
Oh my goodness.
But yeah, I mean, like, it's easy to shit on the sequels, but I think good Star Wars makes you realize how like bad that was in retrospect.
Okay.
Yeah,
I wonder
think
if that's also like part of the like TV versus movie format, right? Like in TV, you have a little bit more of that wiggle room.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what made Game of Thrones what it was, because it did get to those depths. And I think you guys are kind of winning me over with this argument. I've sort of struggled with Mandalorian because, you know, at times I just didn't really care that much about some of these side adventures. Looking at you, episode 4, I think, in season 1, when they go to that village and they got to protect the village.
Oh,
like,
everyone
I didn't give a
hates.
shit.
I love that episode.
I love that episode.
Hates that episode.
But On the flip side, I love the Prison Break episode. So it kind of pulls me back and forth. But I think what you guys are saying makes a lot of sense. Like you get invested into the lore, and I agree with you that I think that is Star Wars' strong suit. Like I never really cared much about the main characters in the movies. It was more about the universe that they inhabited, and the Mandalorian like is just like playing that so well at the moment.
It also is like, I don't watch a lot of Westerns. It just seems like a really solid Western too, especially like with Timothy Olyphant. I've never seen Deadwood, but from all accounts I've read, it seems like he's like a very similar character to what he played in Deadwood. So I think like that shows at least like some form of intentionality with like doubling down on the Western vibe.
I really enjoyed that first one. Like you said, right? Like the pacing, I think, Savon, you mentioned this in our group chat, like the pacing felt like real slick, right? Like it was like slow and like, I don't know, I would use the word gritty. I don't know if that's a pacing term, but it just felt like the show was like reveling in just like being in this like one road town, just like lined with saloons basically.
Yeah, they really say take it in.
And the brothel. Yeah. And there wasn't anything else, right? Like he literally stayed in this like one street town, except when he went on this thing to capture the dragon or kill the dragon. And I think they maybe missed an opportunity for like a double cross or something that would have happened in a Western. But I think
Cobb Vanth will definitely
so
come
cool.
back and might betray him for some reason.
I mean, that first episode, I thought, what a great start, and like had a ton of energy. It was like, oh, this was going to be too easy. And then like their bomb thing didn't work. And they kept losing the sand people. Although like, why was it always the sand people that got killed? They were just getting sacrificed left and right. Like you said, there was a bunch of callbacks to the movies, like to Tatooine, to the first, to Return of the Jedi.
Not just callbacks to the movies though.
To New Hope.
Yeah, but also callbacks to the prequels. And that's just like,
Gotcha.
I think that's totally different. Like putting a pod racer in is like not something that would have been in Star Wars.
Gotcha. Yeah, but I kind of thought it was interesting. There's this one like trivia piece around like how they edited A New Hope, where the sand one is like stand person is like standing over Luke or something like that, and he like waves his little staff up and down. And I guess what they didn't have any footage of it, so they literally just wound the footage back and forth and copied it basically, so that it looks like he's pumping his arms up and down. And so in this show, the way they celebrate the killing of the dragon is they all move their staffs up and down as if they are the original sand person in the original one.
I feel like
I thought that was like kind of a
we
weird
should call
thing.
them Tusken Raiders, sand people.
Tusken Raiders?
I think is a bit of a pejorative.
Pejorative? I was wondering. I was like,
I don't like that either.
Like they say sand people, but like, I mean, they say it. That's the show. Should I say it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
They
Fair
put
enough.
that extra like spice on it. That's not
sand people.
good. Yeah.
All right.
And it was cool because I think one thing that was really unique was when the Mandalorian translated with them, and we never have actually had dialogue with them. Like the most like we saw of like what their culture was like was Luke essentially committing like genocide on them and just like massacring. But that was it. That was like, oh well, there are women and children, But like now, like communicating with them and like really bringing that culture in is like. That again, and maybe I'm looking too into it, but it's like that was like the first weird species we saw in Star Wars, and now they've made an effort to kind of like dive into like what do they actually look like. So it's not just like building like new lore, it's at the same time it's like building on a foundation that was laid with no intention of being anything. Like I don't think George Lucas in the 70s was like, this is going to be a whole thing. But now it is a whole thing in a really awesome way, not in just like a cheesy way.
Yeah, and they also
they're
like explain
they're not
their
savages, right? They're domesticating animals, so we know they've got like actual society going on.
Yeah,
but
and they talk about the code that they live by, right? And the different values that are kind of guiding their behavior, and it humanizes them in a way that they weren't before. Like,
and it would be
just
so
savages
easy
before.
to like dive like too deep and be like, well, why do they wear the mask? Like, what's under those things? You don't get any of that. It's literally just like here are them as essentially people in this world. And I think like a big theme when you've heard like all the directors and writers talk about the show is that it's like a people story at the end of the day, and it's cool seeing that come out in a way that we can like develop new species, which is something that like Star Wars has been lacking for a long time, of like meaningfully developing other species that don't look like people in a way that isn't like cliche and like on the nose with like what is under the mask, and like they need a breathing apparatus and blah blah blah, but they managed to like kind of flush them out in almost a poetic way, like with a Mandalorian speech where it's like the desert is harsh but so are they, and blah blah blah. And I was like, that's so cool, and it's so like not cheesy.
That idea of
like
getting at like people and making a people focused story. I will say though, I do think the Mandalorian does have a growing problem with its protagonist, who is always under a helmet and kind of less of a person because of it. Like it's, you know, you can't get into a person without seeing their eyes and their facial expressions. And you know, like his character, we get hints of like him as a person, but as very fleeting. And I don't know how much longer they can keep doing that without, you know, falling into the trap of, you know, the first Spider-Man, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, where it's just like, here's a guy in a mask. You don't see him emote ever. Good luck trying to relate to him.
To be fair, Tobey Maguire doesn't emote much without a mask on. Anyway.
Fair.
But I feel like the one way they do develop the character is as like with the child as the foil, right? Like you see him getting like more fatherly as it progresses, but you're not really on a small level. I guess you're right. We're not really getting like a ton of development there. Although I don't know.
I kind of agree with that, but I think the counter argument is like you can see it in his choices, right? So you can see him every single time he's faced with a choice of like, what do I need to do in this moment, or what is the best next move? You can see him struggling with like, do I stay here? Do I go? Do I fight? Do I run?
But you can't see that when he's sitting there in that moment.
I don't know. I feel like I do see it. I mean, like, maybe it's not the same as if he didn't have the helmet. And so, like, I do think there's definitely... I think that would add something if, like, eventually his helmet came off. But I haven't missed it as a viewer. I do think I see him, like, struggling with who am I and what are the choices that I'm making according to my own personal code, especially now that I'm not with the Mandalorians that he's been with for a long time, right? Like, he's having to make these choices on his own about what's right and what's wrong. And his experience as a bounty hunter as being more ruthless, and you know, he's having to make these choices and to be a good person, and right, and he struggles with that sometimes, because sometimes that's going to put him in harm's way and he doesn't know if that's the right choice. It's going to put the kid in harm's way. He doesn't know if that's the right choice. And I think it's like there's a human condition there that all people face, right? We don't know what's coming next, but we still have to try and make the best choice that we can in that moment.
And we don't need to talk about the second episode, but there is a moment in there where like his actions are now like having an impact on things that happen to him. And I think like we won't spoil it, but it's funny because that is probably the biggest actual takeaway of episode 2 is now like, oh, well, the decisions he's making are going to now have different outcomes for him.
I'm kind of with Wesley though, in that like I think a strong point of the show is how they've been able to like give you a sense of his morality despite the fact that you can't see his face. Will he kill? Yes. Is he cruel? No. Will he kill if he feels wronged? Yes. Will he stick to his word? Yes. But will he word it in a way that's maybe kind of deceitful, like with a guy who dies, you know, that he leaves to die? Like maybe. Like I like that. But I'm also kind of seeing him as almost like how certain video games will have a borderline silent protagonist, but the game still has a good story. Because ultimately, they're the vehicle for you to see all of these things happening. Now, granted, he's a little bit more involved because he does have lines, but I think the minimalist take on his character is not necessarily a weakness. Like, it might be a maybe different strokes thing, but... I mean, I think we've seen stories with like protagonists who weren't engaging or were silent or didn't do a lot, but everything happening around them was still super beautifully and well done, and that's what made you appreciate it. So
Yeah, Link and the Legend
exactly.
of Zelda.
It's like yeah, exactly. Like Legend of Zelda's production, world building, different species and cultures, beautiful. Link does nothing but like progress the
Link
story.
is just boring white boy once
Yeah.
again.
No, but Link's awesome because you see it through his actions, but ultimately Link isn't what makes the story interesting. And I think that to a degree with Mandalorian, it's similar. Like a lot of the highlights aren't really him, it's his interactions with people. I think that's all right.
Yeah.
All right, so now that we've seen episode 1, what are we hoping for this season kind of goes now that we kind of see like, okay, this is the first tone or the first foot they put forward. What are you hoping that you see out of this season?
I mean, for me, like right now, it's all hinging on like, well, what are they going to do with Boba Fett, and like, how are they going to bring him in, and what is that going to look like? And I think like I have no hopes because like I think it's clear they've taken like if you like having hoped for what the show was before it started, would anyone have guessed it would be Baby Yoda and that would be the whole thing? So it's like, I'm such a nerd that I have like such eminent faith in Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau that I'm just like pumped every week. And like normally with other Star Wars shit, I'm like reading all like diving into it and blah blah blah. But it just seems like there's a much more like chill tone around it with like not lower expectations, but like just faith in the media that people aren't feel the need to like really like guess what's going to happen moving forward. And I think people do that, especially with Star Wars, and are just always disappointed. And it's been weird, like not seeing that dialogue happening as much with fans.
Well, if you don't like episode 2, episode 3 comes out next week, right? But if a movie is bad or you don't like the movie, you're now waiting another
like,
2
yeah.
years to watch another one.
That could be bad.
And it could be bad, but also if
And
it's
has
having to
been.
build on a movie you didn't like,
Yeah.
now you're like, well, I know the next one's going to suck because it's trying to build on this movie I thought was already bad, right? So if you're already in that space, that is tough if you don't like if you didn't like the second movie of the recent trilogy, right? You're not really looking forward to the third one now. You know, it's just a lot of negativity
hype
there.
killer.
So I get that, but I think you can be more chill, right? Because if you don't like, I mean, not all of the episodes from last season were bangers, right? But like,
Disagree,
if you didn't
but
like
okay.
it, you got another chance at it next week, and you're all right, you know. And on aggregate, it works out. So
Well, like
maybe that's why.
my thing, I don't know if y'all get this vibe. Every week when it ends, it's like jarring. Like you don't expect the end to come. Like something like you do with the Boba thing, where you're like, oh fuck, that's it. Like, and it felt the same way after the end of the first season, where it's like they leave you wanting more so much. So it's just a weird vibe when you ask like, well, what do you hope for the rest of the season?
Savon, what are you hoping for the rest of the season?
For most things, I try to fall into the camp of just like, if I build up expectations of what I want it to be, I'll be disappointed. So if it's something that I'm willing to like invest time in watching, I'm just going to trust that the people know what they're doing because I'm not an expert. I don't know how to write. I don't know how to direct. All I can do is hope that they tell a story that I watch and I'm entertained watching it. So far, I'm entertained. Like, I don't like Westerns, so I've never been into
Level-headed, my
those,
friend.
but it turns out this was very Western themed, and it turns out, hey, well, the execution's good, so I don't gotta be a fan of Westerns. I'm a fan of a well done show. So,
Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like both of you have been like, fuck you and your question's a stupid question. Brian, I'm going to ask
No, I
the
like
same
the
question and
question.
see if I get a similar response. What are you hoping for this season?
I want a little bit more meat on some of these episodes. Like after I was cool with episode 1, like I enjoyed it, but then to see kind of the same thing in episode 2 got me a little disappointed, and there wasn't any more forward trajectory into the overarching storyline. Like, I mean, the way season 1 ended, like Gustavo Fring comes out of nowhere and kills Werner Herzog. Like, that's some crazy shit. And and we saw a lot of the child Baby Yoda, like, you know, evolving his role in the series as being more active and having more agency in what happens. So it feels a little bit odd to take a step back for 2 episodes and not have a lot of forward movement or any indication. So now it feels like the arch of season 2 is just another side quest, right? It's a quest about finding more Mandalorians. And so, you know, I need more hints of where this thing is going for me to like continue the investment. But you know, I do enjoy these big set pieces that the first 2 episodes brought. I'm I'm just wondering, like, when are they going to run out of budget on these things?
It's
Like-
Disney, literally never. The mouse
that's true, that's true.
provides.
I mean, Game of Thrones postponed their final season for like, what, 2 years or something like that, so they could CGI all those dragons. And yet somehow Disney comes back with season 2 after half a year or something with these
Yeah.
giant monsters.
Yeah.
It's nuts.
Yeah.
Quick thing I'll add,
Well,
Brian.
I like that. Yeah.
A quick thing I'll say. Actually thinking about it, one hope I do have is that shows like one thing I think that made like Avatar: The Last Airbender so good was that the show was also perpetually
Also
full of
written by
side
Dave
quests,
Filoni.
but the side quests ultimately tied back into the main story. Like, lots of the side characters ultimately they made relevant. Like when they invade the Fire Nation, oh, look at all these characters from these side quests. Look, they're actually really helping and relevant. My hope is that a lot of these side quests and side characters from season 1 as well, if they can find a way to meaningfully tie that back in, because I think that's how you really make a good side quest in any media, right? Like, it's fun, it's on its own, it's self-contained, but if you could make it still tie back in a way to the main event without being over-dominating, I love that. So that's my big hope, I'd say. That's my only real hope.
God, now
A new
think about
hope,
how
you would
bad
say.
the end of Game of Thrones was.
A new hope. What'd you say, Mike?
So now I'm thinking about how bad the end of Game of Thrones was.
Let's just not.
So
it
thank
was
you
awful.
for
So
putting me
bad.
through-
Just
thank you
repress
for
that
putting me
memory.
through that, Brian. Yeah.
You're welcome. Fuck
Savon,
those
what you
dragons.
said
They
reminded
added
me.
nothing.
In fact, they took
Savon.
away.
Yeah, what you said reminded me of Horizon Zero Dawn, right? Like, there's all these side quests, but like as the story wraps in, like all these characters come back and they like play important roles in kind of the finale. So that's pretty cool. Let's move on to our last topic of the day. You guys feel good about that?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
All right. So this week, coming up, PS5 and Xbox Series X have their launch days. Pre-orders are obviously all taken up. Everybody's been sad little cheeseburgers since a month ago or whatever.
True. True.
And I don't even know how we've talked about this before. Like how if it's possible. Me and Mike, I think, still want to get one on launch day if possible. I mean, we're not gonna like.
Can I say
overpay for
one
it or
thing
anything.
about that in terms of launch
Yeah.
day that I think is pretty
Yeah.
cool? Sony is, I don't know if they're not allowing or what it is, but there will be no in-store PS5s.
No pandemic PS5.
No pandemic.
spreading.
Oh, that's
Sony is
gangster.
not gonna be the cause of any super spreader nonsense. So they're just they put out a thing of being like, don't line up, and there's not gonna be any
Yeah.
in the store. So I think that's actually pretty cool. Just for them to really like, that's a massive decision to make that impacts like a lot of other big corporations. So I think that was cool.
Yeah, I think the difficulty of that is like, I mean, you've been using some kind of script, right? Like to try and hit up the website
Yeah.
to try and get one.
Yeah.
So like, are individuals actually like lay individuals like me? Are we going to be able to get one online and reserve one online, or is it going to all be taken by bots in the first like 0.1 milliseconds
So
that happens?
Right now, the only like information we have about purchasing on launch day is through Walmart. They're doing 4 launches at like noon, 3, 6, and 9 Eastern time PM. But that was my concern, that if it's just ordering online, then they're all going to be bought out by bots. There's no reason to be different. But if it's ordering for in-store pickup, then that's totally different. So Walmart hasn't said what the option is. So you're just going to have to like look at those times. But if it is in-store pickup, you're not really going to have bots unless there's some idiot in like New Orleans, aka me, who's like running a fucking script to try and like pick up I'm going to be scalping PS5s on the Walmart on Chop on December.
Oh my God,
So
Mike!
if
I like
anybody's
saw
interested,
red for a second when you said that. Scalpers.
holler at your boy.
Just the Walmart on Chop, or was it the scalping part?
You know what? I can live with the Walmart on Chop because it actually provides things to people. But a scalper,
me, just, yeah.
scum of the earth.
But we really have no idea what launch day, like what numbers are going to look like at all. So, I mean, like I'm going to try with Walmart. We'll see like what the other places are doing. As of now, there hasn't been any news of what they're going to do. So could be chaos. It could be not.
The Walmart on Gentilly can go screw itself.
You don't like the
All right.
Carver Walmart?
No. All right. So this week, or sorry, no, in the past couple weeks or so, there've been like YouTubers. There's been some early like reviews that have started to trickle out. They've kind of lifted a few of the embargoes. a couple of things. I'll just kind of name some of the things I noticed, and then you guys can talk about whatever you want. So PS5, some of the people that have been able to get advanced copies of the console have been able to preview how fast loading the all of the apps are, how fast loading the system itself is. In fact, that's actually something that's been shown on the Xbox Series X as well. There's been a few unboxings that people have done. There's been demos of Astro's Playroom and the DualSense controller. So basically, the new PS5 controller. NBA 2K21 developers have talked about like how they feel like the next gen consoles and PS5 have really opened up for them. We've gotten some Miles Morales Spider-Man game footage, which has been pretty cool. On the Xbox Series X side, they have publicized that the external hard drive, the one that you plug in, that's like basically the same thing as the internal one, is going to be $220 a pop for a 1 terabyte. So it's going to be pretty expensive. It's like 1/3 of the cost of a system. Dirt 5 has had some gameplay, and they've been able to show the different graphics that are coming out for that on Xbox. Some people have showed how it up-reses older titles from previous systems. I think some of the PS5 footage has showed that too a little bit. And then quick resume, 12 to 16 seconds to switch from one game to another and be playing, not just like to change the
how
game.
How useful is that? Like,
well, I don't know. I think I want to get your take on that. And then all of them have sort of, we've seen some things about like the 120 hertz versus 4K trade-off that the systems can make. In Dirt 5, like they showed the setting that could prioritize either the 120 hertz frame rate, or you can prioritize the 4K, like the higher resolution, and that's up to you kind of to prioritize which one, and then the game and the system will figure out how to make that happen. But so far they haven't been able to do the 4K and 120 FPS at the same time.
Can you explain to
take
me
it away.
what hertz is? It's different than frames per second.
No, I don't know the difference. I mean, I think people tend to use them interchangeably. It's just like how fast the screen is refreshing. I think there's probably also how fast the system is refreshing and sending an actual picture. So I think the idea is the PS5 or the Xbox Series X will send 120 pictures, different individual pictures per second. Whether your screen can handle those extra, those 120 frames per second is, up to your TV. So I don't know. I mean, I think usually we say that the TV itself is 120 hertz, and usually we're saying that the system is going to be, 120 FPS or 60 FPS or whatever, and it's just like how much it's outputting.
Well, that's why this podcast is called what it is, because we only know some
We can
of
be
the
wrong
stuff.
about that. I don't think it
we
matters.
only know some of the
Yeah.
stuff. I'm
I don't think that
Googling it
matters.
right now, and I'm like, you know what? It's
I call those nerd numbers.
So I just wanted to get your guys' takes on. I think for me, the thing that stood out for sure was Astro's Playroom and everybody's reaction to how the DualSense controller played into it. But if you guys had any thoughts on the other things, I'd love to hear it. Brian, maybe you kick us off.
All right. So in our previous podcast, when we were talking about the PS5, I was very much in the wait and see column, right? Especially because Miles Morales is coming out for PS4
also, yeah.
And same with Horizon Zero
Shit.
West.
Am I seeing a little bit of an opinion change here?
Well, so watching some of this critical review or critical responses about the DualSense controller, I think it's cool that it changes intensity and to mimic different texture feels depending on what the character is interacting with at that moment. It can mimic glass or hardwood or something like that.
That boggles my mind. Like,
which
how
is kind of
he doing
crazy.
that?
Yeah.
Especially, shout out to Nintendo 64 that introduced the world to the Rumble Pack. Like going from that to this, it seems kind of like a big difference maker, because I don't know if you guys have played a game without vibration in recent years. Like it's, the experience does lack a lot. And so now that we get something that is even more tactile is interesting. Same with the trigger buttons.
Yeah.
I thought that was like an interesting addition. I think it does bring gaming into sort of a different sphere.
Can you explain what you mean by the trigger buttons, or what's happening with them?
So my understanding of it is that they're
called adaptive.
They're adaptive.
Okay, man.
And they've added like some springs or something in it. so that it can sense pressure and tension in a very
And
minute
change, right?
way.
Can it change the tension?
Yeah, so like when you're pulling on
according
a
to the game,
bow,
yeah.
when you're pulling on a bow, like the trigger like has some like resistance, so you feel that resistance of pulling the string on the bow and stuff like that.
Right. So usually, I think trigger buttons you normally just get either button press or duration of that button press. But now there's tension and maybe a little bit more. There other options. So yeah, so that could definitely affect gameplay. Like, could you imagine in Miles Morales or something, maybe there's a more forceful web shot, or maybe you have to be a little bit more delicate depending on the situation. That could be an entire level or something, a new type of genre. Not just stealth or something, but stealth plus. Having a delicate button press, that changes platforming, does all sorts of things. I think, depending how developers apply it. And then, moreover, I read a review comparing the Miles Morales game on PS5 and PS4.
Ooh, interesting.
They
Okay.
had it was on Polygon. Shout out to Polygon. They had
Saw that.
sliders so you could see the different imagery on both systems. Still really nice on PS4, but the PS5 version way more cinematic because of the colors and
The
dynamic
ray
range.
tracing.
But I think the
God rays.
key difference was the loading. And so I thought there would only be like loading time, when you open a door or something like that, or switch locales. But they were noting that there were some loads while swinging through the city.
Oh no.
And that is a big problem. that completely kills the experience of being and playing
On
as
4
Spider-Man.
or 5?
On four.
yeah.
Whereas on 5, instantaneous.
Well, another
That's
thing I
it.
saw there was like when we talked about this, I saw a thing where it was like on 4, like you go to the window or like you go to the door to leave the room and it goes to one of those loading screens, like it shows tips and shit. On the 5 version, there's no loading screen.
Right.
He just does
Doesn't
like
exist.
an animation through the thing. So it's completely different.
There's like opt-in load-in animations for PS5. That's how crazy it is. It's like fast travel in the new game happens via subway, like a subway ride.
Yeah.
Which you'll see on the PS4 version, but you have the option to turn it on the PS5 version.
If you liked it,
just
or
for
something. For the
flavor.
immersive
Yeah,
experience.
it's
It's like you mere mortals,
the
your
breath.
brains can't process like the power of this PS5 solid state drive. You need like it's like in like the Alien movies where they're like, I need to show you this form, otherwise your brain would explode. Like Sony's just
I
like,
called that. I said gamers have been so used to these like loading screens and transitions that like I wonder if game designers will need to put them in even just because people are used to them having them.
Yeah, they
right?
wait for a loading screen to take a break or to send
Yeah.
a text
Exactly,
or
it's
to
a
eat
breather.
a bite of a
Yeah.
ice cream cone.
Can I go back to something Brian said because it's like something we talked
course.
about. So like you talked about like different mechanics within the game that's like impossible because of the new hardware. So and then like that it's the same shit with like the load times and stuff. I think what's going to be cool about this generation that's going to be unique is it's such a jump forward in terms of like what the hardware can do that it has a tangible impact creatively on what developers can actually like put into games. And it seems like one of the videos we watched was this guy Dave Lee, who I've never seen before, but he seems really great. And one thing that struck me is like he's really
Yeah, I
good-
like his videos. He does a lot of hardware review stuff.
Yeah, but
that
he's
was cool.
really good at explaining stuff. But even he couldn't put into words what the haptics kind of and like the impact was. And I think that's what's really gonna like shock people with this is that it's just gonna completely change the way like we think about what gaming can look like on a console. And like that just can't exist on PC, right? Like can it? Like having like the haptics and that kind of stuff. Like obviously you can have the load times, but those games are always going to be like kind of limited to someone that might have lesser hardware. But because the base of the PS5 is going to be like pretty great hardware that's designed in a way that works well with each other, it just seems like the floor is way higher than it's ever been before.
PC Master Race, bro.
Savon, what are you thinking?
PC Master
PC
Race,
Master
but
Race.
no. The trigger thing is interesting because like if I'm playing GTA, I could put the trigger down of how fast I want to go, and that affects it, and that's nice. But Brian, I'm really thinking like I was like the tension part. I was like, that's cool, that's good for the immersive experience. But the delicate touch part, I'm like, ooh, you could actually use that to be like. That could be a genuine, like, imagine if, like, you were playing a shooter or something, and, like, there was a certain thing you had to do in the midst of a firefight, but it literally requires a soft touch. Otherwise, it doesn't work the way it's intended to, or, I don't know, something like that.
Well, not to interrupt a little bit, but the triggers on the PS4 and Xbox are analog. So if you do a 10% pull on the trigger, that is different than if you do a 50% or 100% pull on the trigger. They know the difference between that already. I think what's being added here is that, like, if you're like Mike's example of a bow draw, right? Like the beginning of a bow draw should be pretty easy because you're not pulling very hard on the bow itself. But as you get to the end of the trigger pull, they can put more force on it so that becomes a lot harder for your finger to actually pull on it. And then there can be like a cutoff point where it actually flips over a threshold and it becomes easy again, right? So they can time out basically along each point of the trigger pull how hard it is to actually make that happen. So I don't know if that clarifies or doesn't clarify anything what you're saying, but there is already analog.
Yeah, no, I mean,
Right.
the tension
But
part.
it's not. But that's not used though, is it? Like, what games like there's a difference in pulling 10% than pulling 75%?
Yeah, maybe not a difference, but in shooters, right, you have to hit a certain point on the trigger to get it to fire, and that point may be different
But
depending on the game.
I've
or
literally
whatever.
never been mindful of that. I always.
I mean,
pull
I've
the
played
trigger
like
down.
games where
It's
you
just
bow and
on and off for
arrow,
you.
and like if you are,
Oh, racing games.
yeah,
They do it for the
sure.
throttle, right? You can throttle up 10%, 50% so that you're not sliding off the track.
True. Never mind. That was a stupid
but-
take of mine.
But regardless, I just think the idea of like, to Brian's point though, I just think you could do some interesting. There's just some really interesting directions you could take that where you could not only make it immersive, but you could actually use it to add a layer of challenge to games in other ways. I'm not sure exactly what that looks like. 'Cause I'm not a game designer, but the implications are very like. The implications are interesting, and you might not see it with the launch titles, but as you start seeing some games down the pipeline, somewhere out there is going to be like, yo, all right, we can do this with the triggers. Yo, this is some really dope shit we can like play around with that was literally not possible before. So like, I don't know what's going to be happening with that, but Brian, I'm glad you kind of opened my eyes to that. I think what
Yeah, shooting free throws might feel
yeah,
different.
exactly. I'm thinking like I was thinking like
Sure.
for 2K, like if you have to do a float, like when you say soft touch, immediately I thought like a basketball floater. Like you know,
Yep.
dunking requires strength and force, but a floater requires legitimate like delicate touch. You do too much, it's gonna be bad. And you could legit incorporate that into a game of like, hey, if you press this too hard, you're gonna miss straight up. And like
So now Savon can lose in 4K and stunning. I can lose in 2K and stunning 4K, 60 frames per second, 120
With style.
with ray tracing, so
hey,
you could
as
see
long
the
as my
sweat
player
of your
looks real,
character.
I don't care if I'm getting stomped.
And haptic feedback.
But
We'll give him the big fro like you rock
Yeah.
right now.
but also the big thing I'm excited for is like I think the load times thing for me is what I'm really excited for, specifically with switching games. I know from personal experience, if I'm playing like PlayStation, what?
Continue. It's just like that's such a weird thing to me. I've never been like, man, I wish I could quickly go from one game
well, hear
to
me out,
another.
hear
It's
me
like
out.
just like encouraging ADHD.
No,
like,
hear me out. You gotta hear me out
Yes.
on this, bro. When me and my homies are like playing games after work, me, Tyler, Kendall, we're playing games. We have like maybe 5 games or a rotation of games we're all playing. If one game, if we're getting stomped in Overwatch or if GTA isn't going well, we're like, yo, I'll play something else. All right, cool. And we're immediately all trying to switch to a new game. If it's a weekday night, we got 2.5 hours to play. Switching between a game, loading up, joining a lobby, that starts to turn into a 5-10 minute endeavor. That's not a lot of time when
Yeah.
you're playing by yourself on a weekend.
it is a lot
But when
of
you
time.
got finite time with your friends, like sometimes we'll literally play Rocket League because we know Rocket League loads up quick and you can get into a game in like X time. There are nights where we straight up said we're not going to play GTA, not because it's not fun or because we don't want to, but because we're going to have to load the game, get into a lobby, get into each other's lobbies, meet up, and that can turn that we have timed it. That has turned into 15 to even 20-minute endeavors just to get lined up, and that's not like a
Yeah.
GTA specific issue, but a lot of big games that have to load, like that adds up, especially for multiplayer. So I don't
Yep.
care for my single player games, but if I can jump to games with my friends when we have finite time, that could save us 30, 45 minutes of just loading that we can just be playing shit. And like that makes a tangible like gaming experience when you can just hop to what you want to do very quickly without having to like someone says, "Oh, the game's loading. All right, I'm gonna go get a snack real quick," and then that adds up, man. We play Warzone like
Low times kill the vibe.
Yeah.
But you keep it flowing. So I wasn't excited about that as much before, but now that I've started thinking about the implications of it, that's like a much more appealing selling point. Like if I started up Red Dead right now, it might be 10 minutes before I'm really doing exactly what I want to be doing in the game, or 5 minutes. But a minute, that's a whole nother thing. That's different. It's built different.
So my understanding is that Quick Resume is going to be an Xbox Series X thing for sure. PS5 has not confirmed that they're going to do a Quick Resume, but in some of the user interface and user experience videos, there was a way to like use these like card systems to like kind of switch between.
Yeah.
So that I think that's a little bit of an unknown right now, like how much what Quick Resume actually is going to look like on PS5. I think for me, switching from like a streaming service like Hulu into a game, I want that to be fast. Just because like I'll be watching, something on streaming, and then I'll want to switch over after I'm done eating lunch or whatever, and like I don't want to spend 5 minutes waiting for the game to load. I just want to start playing. So I think that could be useful for me. But I think you're right too, Mike. Right? Like usually when I'm playing, I'm probably only going to play one game. I'm not going to like be switching back and forth. So that may be mileage may vary there. Yeah, I mean I don't know if you guys got to see any of the Dirt 5 video. Footage that they've shown for the Xbox Series X. It looks good. I mean, they're doing a lot with like just the like dust that comes off of them. The actual course itself is like beautifully done. The cars look good. They move good. On PS5, the developers for 2K21 were showing off some of their new footage, and a couple of things they pointed out were like they thought that they had done a much better job getting the players, like the characters, to plant on the floor. They weren't like skating across the floor. And that was something that I had picked up on, I think, earlier when we first saw the initial footage, but that was all cutscene footage.
You did?
Yeah.
You've had 2 good takes today, Wes, and I've had 2 bad takes that I immediately came back on.
But we couldn't tell for sure in that June release because it was all cutscene footage, right? We couldn't tell. It wasn't gameplay footage. So yeah, you could make the plant because you rendered the whole thing, right? Like you took a lot of time with that care, but is the game going to be able to do it in real time? And they feel like they've done a better job with it. I couldn't necessarily tell in the short snippets they gave. And then they also showed a side by side of the actual arena and the crowd and like how it was designed, and you could tell like they could do much more because they just had more bandwidth to work with on the PS5. And I think obviously that's just a minor thing, but anything you can do to make the arena feel more real is going to make the game feel more immersive. So I would definitely be into that. And if you're killing the loading time, God, I've been complaining about this for like 3 pods straight, but like the load times on 2K20
Disgusting.
are absurd. And if you can get the load times down to 5 seconds even, I'd be willing to go another round with a 2K game. Yeah. So
can you play in the bubble in the game?
We don't know.
Oh, interesting. I don't know.
You can't in 2K20,
but they are gonna do. I mean, I don't. For our what are the idiots we call them? The guys
Neckbeards?
the neckbeards. They're not gonna be excited that the WNBA is included.
Oh Jesus!
You
I'm
can.
so
they
excited.
had it last
We're
game,
doing
though.
a whole. Oh, did they really?
Yeah.
Was there like
but
a
you're gonna be able to
backlash?
do like
WNBA My
you're gonna be
Career,
able to do
though,
the My
that's
Career.
gonna be dope.
Yeah,
Oh.
you're gonna be able to play like as like a single player as a WNBA player
And go online
through
and everything.
That service.
I'm so
Yeah.
excited to read the salt.
Oh,
my God.
one tech thing I'll add. I saw with the Miles Morales game. I know we're talking about the load times and like a lot of the ray tracing and colors and whatnot. Hot off the presses, Miles can wear Timbs. Miles can wear Timbs. I saw it on
True
Twitter.
Yorker right there.
I,
True Yorker.
I saw it on Twitter, and it was like, they're like, this is real, and I was like, it's real. It's like, and you can customize his fit, so Miles can wear Timbs. I might have to get a PS5 day one, or Mike, I might have to just be at your crib to ensure that the moment the game allows you to wear Timbs, you're wearing them dead ass, no cap.
If Miles,
Savannah's gonna be like, put them on, and be like, I don't want to be put them on.
I will harass you until you make him wear those Timbs. And
I'm
kick the shit
excited
out
to
of a
put on
girl.
the Spider-Verse suit. I think that's a really cool thing they did, and it's not just aesthetic. If you put on the movie suit, the animation of the character changes, like in the movie.
Oh, is that how it's controlled? Because we noticed that, right? The visual style is different. On
Yeah,
some of the
well, in
gameplay.
the movie, the character's animated at a slower frame rate to make him look jerky, and then when he gets better as Spider-Man, it becomes a faster frame rate. So when you put that suit on, the character's animated at a slower frame rate, which is like far more effort they put into that than they needed to. But it's like a really cool way to connect with that movie.
Super
that
sweaty.
is like universally loved. Super sweaty development, trying way too hard.
Wow, what's a trial?
Well, and you see the like pow, right? There's like a little bit of a
Yeah,
pow you
like
see.
the
So they
comic
cartoonify
pop
it a little
shit.
bit.
Yeah, I mean, like that's such a cool thing. It's the game's already. We don't need to get into it, but this game has already been politicized like quite a bit, which is like makes sense. Like if you're gonna have like a black superhero and you're entering into that space with that conversation. But the internet is all over the place on that. All parts of the spectrum are putting issues with it. Yeah.
I have not been hearing that, so that'll be interesting. Maybe we'll talk about that next time when we actually get some real
Well,
hands-on
like I
footage.
said, I have the game, so I can look at the box, kind of relay thoughts there. But
Tell us about the packaging.
yeah, I'll do an unboxing via podcast, which is
Yeah,
the worst medium.
a visual
to do it on.
medium.
Yeah.
It'll be the first ASMR unboxing.
Should we get the haptic controller? We
Yeah,
can
you
just
just
feel
need to
out
listen.
what he
You
touches.
gotta listen to like fucking plastic being unwrapped, like next to the sound of my grating Jewish whiny voice.
Oh,
Have you guys seen that? So when Sony did that teardown video, and they showed the panels coming off, the white panels, and everyone was like, "Oh, those are like pretty easy to remove. It's just like a couple of tabs, no screws needed." Apparently, Sony is threatening any company that's tried to say like, "Hey, we're gonna make custom colors or whatever of the actual panels. Like we're gonna make replacement panels." Sony's threatened them with lawsuits. So Sony does not want third-party companies making their own panels for you to put on your PS5 to customize. So that's kind of a bummer, I think.
Can I say something about that video?
Which video?
The teardown one.
Yeah.
So it's an
absolutely.
awesome video. It's this guy on the biggest table I've ever seen, and it's like
with a little elevator in the middle.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't even notice that. It's so methodical and calm. And I turned it on, and it's in Japanese. And I guess like I watched it right as it came out. I don't know if there weren't subtitles or if I just am an idiot and didn't turn it on. But I watched like at least 5 minutes of that in Japanese. I don't speak a word of Japanese, but I was like, all right, this is kind of cool. I'm going to keep watching this. And then later on, I saw there were subtitles. I was like, oh, I'm an idiot.
I didn't know there were
Like,
subtitles.
Did you do it too? Do
Yeah,
you
I
speak
definitely watched
Japanese?
No.
So then
I
we're
was
just
just like,
both. It's like
We're just watching it.
This is just
Yeah.
like meditative.
You could tell what he was doing.
That's like
Whatever,
the
you
new YouTube genre right there. It's like lo-fi Japanese.
just like body language. Like I get the energy. I'm reading his energy, not the words.
Well, all right.
All right. Well, right on. I think that's all we got for our little mom and pop show here tonight. Anybody got any big takeaways or big thoughts?
I'm very excited for the PS5. Like coming from me as a hype beast, I know that doesn't mean much, but I'm very excited for it. I'm very excited to play it on this new TV. I'm gonna try my best to get one. I'm probably not, and like Siobhan said, I'm gonna lose sleep over it.
I'm really hoping to pick one up too, but I'm not gonna go too crazy on it. I'll log in at maybe midnight the night before and see if they're live, and then in the morning before when I get up, I'll maybe log in again and see if I can get one. But I've been a little bit resigned to this just not happening yet. We'll see.
I made peace with it. I've made peace with like accepting that I won't get one day one, but don't get it twisted. If I could get one day one, I would. I already got the money like earmarked or whatever like that ain't a thing. Like I'm ready. But
Yeah, take my
I'm
money,
just like
guys.
I just like to temper my expectations. But if I do know that I can get
Fuck
one,
that.
if I do know I can get one, I won't say that I'll be sick for work the next day, but if I can confirm ahead, I'll probably be sick or take off or something. If I
think that's fair.
What's up?
Spend your
All right,
whole day
friends.
off with software updates.
Don't say it. That's not funny.
Well, let's do this again. Maybe a little sooner than a month. Hopefully, we'll get our 2-week schedule on. I think that's our goal. to hit it about every 2 weeks. We're excited. PS5 launching this week, friends. Mandalorian season 2, episode 2 came out yesterday, and then in a week we'll get episode 3 and see if we can kind of make our way with some forward trajectory, like Brian said. Everybody listening out there, we hope you've had a good time listening to us. This has been Confidently Wrong. I'm Wes. This is Mike, Savon, and Brian. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on Twitter. Both of those at confidently_pod. We're starting to put a little bit more stuff out there. And just really enjoying this whole process, guys. Subscribe. Leave us a 5-star review. We need it. We got to get some traction here out in the Apple podcast world, because this is a lot of fun and we like doing it. But if more people could listen, more people could enjoy our inanities and ridiculousness. Thanks, friends. I had fun.
Vice President Kamala Harris, give us a follow.
Yo.
Mamala Harris.
Kamala.
Stupid.